Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 11 o'clock. I need a motion for the adoption of the agenda. Councillor Richardson, second by Councillor Joyce. Any declaration of community interest? Seeing none, no deputations, and we'll get right into the presentations, and we'll start off with 4.1. Oh, sorry, adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Joyce, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Thank you. And 4.1, the departmental budget presentation by Sarah Johnson, the Chief of Paramedic Service. Go ahead, Sarah.
Good morning, and thank you, Budget Committee, for having us. It's great to be here, and we're pleased to be talking about the Paramedic Service Department and the proposed budget as we move into the upcoming year. I think presentations are fairly standardized, so the Budget Committee is likely experiencing very similar format and layout from department to department, but essentially we're going to be providing key highlights of the department and the proposed budget. We're going to be highlighting some key changes and justification or explanation rationale behind those changes, and really talking about how that ties in with strategic goals, master plan, and just overall trying to do our very best to provide the best patient care for the community. We're going to start by looking at a condensed version of our organizational chart. Paramedic service is supported by three main pillars or divisions. The first being administration. Administration is led by our executive assistant, Renee Ford, who's joining us today. And Renee oversees a very small but mighty team of about 2.5 AAs. So we have some hours there to account for what was a summer student, but we usually use that as needed throughout the year. And that team of Cindy Meinecker, Beth Johnson, and Christy Novus really fulfills the traditional roles of administration. So things like reporting and reconciling financial activities, scheduling, and just keeping the department generally on track. We have professional standards that is led by one of our two deputy chiefs. So the deputy chief of professional standards is Jamie Golden, also joining us today. And Jamie is supported really heavily by two key people in our organization. So both deputy chiefs are supported by the superintendent level, and Jamie oversees two of those superintendents, which we can refer to as almost like project managers of different subdivisions within that department. So we have the superintendent of community paramedicine, which is Autumn Campbell, and we have the superintendent of staff development and wellness, Brandon Ferguson, and neither of which could be here. They're busy today, but appreciate their efforts. And last but not least, we have our operations division, and that is led by our second of two deputy chiefs, and that's Stephen Lucas, who is joining us. And again, Steve not only oversees operations, but all things logistics. So that's a critical aspect of our organization. Both of these gentlemen are going to be talking briefly about their respective portfolios in the next few slides. But Stephen is supported very heavily by the superintendent rank, and those are 4 full-time operational supervisors. There is a part-time group as well, and they are boots on the ground between ourselves and the frontline staff. You may or may not be aware that it's our responsibility under the Ambulance Act as a municipality to operate an ambulance service. The city or the corporation is the designated delivery agent, and the next few slides really talks about what we're doing on the city's behalf to make sure and ensure that we meet those mandatory requirements. Our primary role is through traditional public safety, so responding to urgent and emergent calls for service, 911 calls within the city of Kawartha Lakes and just outside of our borders. Out of interest, we responded to 13,611 calls in 2023. That's equivalent to 1 call every 38 minutes. So I've said it plenty of times before, but it really is a busy service, a busy system, and we're seeing that growth in volume in every aspect of our service. At full complement between full-time, part-time staff, management, support personnel, we have 132 people. We operate 8 ambulances on days and drop down to 5 on nights. And those ambulances and paramedics operate out of 5 stations and 2 posts. So we have stations in Lindsay, Fenland, Bobcaygeon, Pontypool, and I've included Oakwood, which is our community paramedic headquarters. And we have posts in Coboconk, and we lease space on the west side of Lindsay off McLaughlin Road. In terms of general funding structure, the province funds 50% of the operating budget for paramedic service and 100% of all community paramedic programming. The one item that's not in here that we'll be talking about more when we look at the financial activity is the province also funds 100% of our dedicated offload nurse program funding. So I'm going to turn it over briefly to Deputy Chief Lucas, followed by Deputy Chief Golden, just to go through. They're the experts in these portfolios, so they're going to go through these 2 slides with you.
Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, I'm the Deputy Chief, Stephen Lucas, with the Paramedic Division. 2 years in the role now, so we're getting a little more comfortable with the procedures, and I've worked with many of you here, and it's been a positive experience, so thank you. Kind of what I manage, as our Chief Johnson's mentioned, is kind of the 911 operations side of things. And one of the key components is the deployment plan. We work with 4 other counties, including us. So that's Northumberland, Peterborough, and Haliburton, which is who our Lindsay dispatch up at the courthouse dispatches. And it's a fairly lengthy document, and we review it every quarterly meeting to go over what changes we need to make to meet the demands of each individual service. And the whole goal is to optimize our response times and the service to the citizens. Another component is just procurement of medical supplies, kind of consumable assets, fixed assets, which are kind of the larger assets, such as our monitors, stretchers, ambulance, uniforms. So we do that, trying to, be responsible, but get the best product for our frontline paramedics to serve the people that they serve. I also am responsible for conducting kind of the regular safety inspections that's required by the Ministry of Health's kind of regulations and standards, ensuring that the ambulances meets those standards, as well as the bases meet kind of health and safety standards. As Sarah mentioned, or Chief Johnson mentioned, there's a number of stations we have, and anyone that owns a home, there's a lot of maintenance, and so we're always working towards keeping them well maintained. The next kind of responsibility is the collective agreement, kind of labor management concerns. We meet usually 3-4 times a year with that group, trying to have things worked out in a reasonable way prior to getting to that kind of grievance stage and things like that. But there are times when we can't seem to come to agreement, and we use that system to resolve those. On that note, we do have our collective agreement expiring at the end of this year, so that's something that's on our radar to start those conversations with the Support of People Services and with the union. And then we kind of look after recruitment, as a lot of divisions have. There's always the stress these days with recruitment and trying to get the numbers where we'd like them. What we're going to do this year is we typically do a spring recruitment, which happens when the colleges are graduating a new crew of paramedics. In the fall, it's more difficult because we found that people that weren't hired, there typically was a reason why they weren't hired. So what we're doing this year, Durham is doing a graduating class in December. So we're hoping we can get enhance our part-time staff with that, so that's on the radar. And then as Chief Johnson mentioned, I kind of oversee the 4 full-time strong superintendents that we have, along with the 7 part-time superintendents, which they provide kind of 24/7 support to that frontline staff regarding, health and safety concerns, supporting them on, critical calls, multi-vehicle accidents, things like that. And that's kind of a nutshell what the operations deputy chief does.
Good morning, everyone. As Sarah alluded to earlier, my name is Jamie Golden, and I am the other Deputy Chief. My portfolio basically involves the professional standards. I like to kind of kid with my educational background that I feel like I'm the principal of the paramedic service. Ultimately, the pillar of my responsibility is ensuring compliance with all of our ministry standards and regulations, and with that comes all of the bullets that are basically to follow. One of the main things that I oversee is all of the education, right from development to delivery, which also includes onboarding. The ironic thing is that we're actually involved in a superintendent education day today in our Cameron Training Center, so that's where I was racing from today. It's going quite well. We're in collaboration with both corporate health and safety and people services up there today, so we're just making sure that they're all up to speed on what our standards and regulations are. One of the other portions of my portfolio is making sure that I go and review all of our documentation. So we're looking for compliance with things like patient care directives. I try to provide some sort of data analysis. Sometimes that's an analysis to our staff at our education days, making sure that we know how often we're using certain pieces of equipment, because sometimes that, in us knowing that we have great equipment, but sometimes we're not using it as often as we should be potentially, and sometimes we're not using it because we're just not doing those calls, and that allows us to provide some education to the staff, or maybe it's re-education to the staff because we know that they're not using that equipment as frequently as we would like to. Another part of my portfolio is dealing the fun stuff. It's the complaints, all of our investigations into patient care issues and service complaints usually gets me to dive into what's going on beneath the surface a little bit. It's been an interesting introduction into the investigation world for me. And lastly, I oversee the community paramedicine program, the ever-growing community paramedicine program. And I also look after the offload nurse program, which is nice. It allows me a little different avenue where I collaborate with one of our external allied agencies, the Ross Memorial Hospital. It's been kind of nice to get to collaborate with them, and we're meeting next week to kind of look and see where that offload nurse program's headed in the future, and any other types of new models of care that might come up. We have lots of different medical directives that come up, and I'm kind of responsible for overseeing how that all plays out at the service level. But in a nutshell, that's my role.
Thank you, guys. So we're going to spend some time discussing this slide that provides a financial summary of the Paramedic Service Department. And this is all the business units rolled up to provide that high-level overview to you here. We're going to start by looking at our total revenue, and that's essentially the provincial funding that comes into the paramedic service. We're going to talk about how that breaks out by business unit, but as I mentioned, if you remember back a few slides previous, the province funds 50% of our operating budget and 100% of all community paramedic activities and the dedicated offload nurse program. So between all of those grants, you can see the trend increasing year over year, but it's also important to note that their grant is calculated on 50% of the previous year's council-approved budget. So that means that the revenue for 2025 was already predetermined when council approved the 2024 budget. So, when it opens up a little bit of discussion that if we're making any sort of budget changes, whether it be an increase, a decrease, it's going to take time for those changes to impact the grant, and you actually see the effects the following year. So it's just something really important to note that we always lag a little bit behind in that regard. We are anticipating or expecting to receive about $9.7 million between operating and community paramedicine dedicated offload nurse combined. And again, we'll see how that breaks up in the next few slides. If we look down at expenses, we see salaries, wages, and benefits and an increase there. And that is actually multiple reasons, but I'll explain a few of them. The first being, over the years, we have increased our full-time complement. We've increased full-time staff. Those staff are eligible for vacation time and time away, and we backfill those hours with part-time staff. So over the years, we were adding full-time people, but we weren't adding to our part-time hours, and we had to right-size that budget. It was about 10,000 hours that we had to fix or right-size. We were usually exceeding our budget line, and a deeper dive along with our help from finance, really uncovered that issue. The second is the annual wage adjustment that's determined by our collective agreement. Stephen mentioned that we're going into collective bargaining next year and anticipate annual wage adjustment there. And there is about $450,000 of that is WSIB-related expenses for our department. So previously, this was recorded or captured more generally within the, I believe, the corporate service budget, Director Bukaboom can correct me if I'm wrong there, but it was captured or recorded more globally. Those expenses have been reallocated or shifted back to the departments where those employees belonged. And unfortunately, paramedic service has a significant number of staff off due to WSIB. And because of that, we have a lot of legacy or historical claims. So if a paramedic is no longer able to perform paramedic work for illness or injury, they may still be off work. They may be doing other work within the city, or they may be doing work elsewhere outside of the city. Regardless, that usually equates to at least full or top-up wages for WSIB, along with healthcare related costs. So I hope I did an okay job explaining that, but at the end of Q2 in 2024, we were about $220,000. So tracking for $440,000 by the end of this year. So that's budgeted for next year, and you'll see that impacted or that amount included within that salaries line, which is about $450,000. The rest is in the new position requests that I know were spoken of at length by CAO Taylor a few days ago. We have one slide here just to introduce what our requests are, but happy to discuss that. Materials, training, and services, that's a very large category. It includes things like fuel, medical supplies, utilities for all of the stations, uniforms, training. It's a fairly status quo budget from last year. We knew there was going to be a very large impact in the salaries, and I think that we've worked really hard with finance, corporate services to really sharpen the pencil where we can tighten things in other areas where we have some control, and we've done a little bit better in that area. Contracted services, this is more of how things are recorded. So it appears as though there's a $183 increase in there, but if you skip down to a few lines where it looks like there is a surplus or variance for interfunctional adjustments, what that was is computer software was being paid by IT, and there was an interfunctional adjustment from our department for IT allocation to pay for those computer software expenses. And that's been shifted over to contracted services. Obviously, we're trying to do the best with the provincial grant money that we have, and that helps to offset some of those costs. So the costs have been shifted out of interfunctional adjustments into contracted services. Rents and insurance was just a right sizing of budget. It looks like we're doing a little bit better in that area. It's not. It was just, it's about $1,000 a month for rent at McLaughlin Road. And we had a little bit of excess in that account, so it was just tightened. Transfer to external clients, again, this is more of a recording item. It looks like there's a $195,000 variance there. That is for the dedicated offload nurse program funding. It's 100% funded. It flows into the grant and is captured in that $9.7 million. It comes into the municipality, flows out to the Ross, and has no net impact on our budget. The last thing to discuss, and I apologize if line by line wasn't the intention of going through this, but I do think it's helpful. The transfer to reserves is, it's part of the community paramedic funding that we receive. Typically, that money is just intended to pay for operating costs, staffing, wages. We have been able to work with our colleagues at the ministry to ensure that amount of money be set aside for the new facility. So they've allowed for some capital infrastructure. We're holding that money for the new paramedic base, recognizing that that's going to be home to the community paramedic division, and they need a home. So our colleagues at the province were very gracious to allow that those expenses be shelled away for the building. So that's a total expense, proposed expense of $17.2 million for 2025. 9.7 of that is covered by grant funding, which is about $7.5 million of tax-supported proposed budget for 2025. This is cut off a little bit, but hopefully, I think that's the end of the table that you can see. But the next few slides provides more detail broken up by business unit. This is our administrative and operating services. These two business units are our core business. You can relate this to all 911 operations that happen within our paramedic service. I did want to highlight this is the vast majority of our grant. It's the vast majority of our operating costs, and we are anticipating to receive about $7.2 million in grant for 911 operations next year. The community paramedic program is 100% funded by the province. We receive about $2.3 million in grant funding for that program, with the vast majority going towards salaries, wages, and benefits. And the dedicated offload nurse program, so it is the second year of that program running within Kawartha Lakes. It's where there is a dedicated nurse resource at the hospital to help us offload patients when a bed is not immediately available when the paramedics arrive. The intention is to transfer the patients to the dedicated offload nurse and return the paramedics out to the community to be freed up and available for emergency calls faster. Deputy Chief Golden did a really good job back in the spring to bring forward some evidence about that program. It's doing very well. It's adding value. It is returning our paramedics faster to the road, which is what we wanted to see, and we're very pleased to see it continue. The Kawartha Lakes, or the corporation, is the paymaster for that program. The funds come in from the province to the municipality of $195,000. And they flow out or transfer to external client, the external client being the Ross Memorial Hospital, and we use every dollar of this program funding. So this just gives an overall look at the preliminary department budget variance, and I've talked about the recording and moving expenses and costs around to really maximize the funding. The vast majority of the budget variance is in salaries, wages, and benefits for the reasons I think we've already mentioned, in terms of right-sizing the part-time hours, the collective agreement related wage adjustment, the WSIB expenses or costs, and the additional positions. So those are the big changes. Everything else is almost a wash. I think I stood here around this time last year as a newer chief, shell-shocked, I think, and very surprised at how busy of a year it was. And I'm not too sure why I anticipated anything different, but it really has been a busy year again this year. Last year was a lot about our new staff, and myself, Jamie, and Stephen were all new to our roles, so it was a year of transition, getting more comfortable. And, this year we have accomplished a lot, and I'm very proud of what we've accomplished since coming together, the whole team. And with council's support, we were able to onboard 4 full-time paramedic staff last year. That allowed us to increase and expand coverage in Lindsay. So we added an ambulance from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. That vehicle is busy. It's doing multiple calls a day, 4 or 5 calls a day, and has been a huge benefit and value to distribute the workload a little bit more evenly amongst our staff. We backfilled 7 part-time vacancies, so that's not new staff. There would have been the 4 new staff to match the full-time staff, but the other 13 would have been backfilling for vacancies. And we had our logistics technician retire, Kirk Norris, and we now have Kevin Williams working with us, and he's been a great addition and is supporting our logistics division. On October the 8th, there is a report and presentation that will be forthcoming to update all of council and the public on the status of the paramedic headquarters and fleet center. We're working diligently in the background, and really happy on October the 8th to be able to provide some updates as to what's going on with that project. But by the end of the year, we will have substantially completed the design phase of that headquarters and fleet center building and be in a really good position for breaking ground in the spring, hopefully the spring of 2025. We designed and launched a patient experience survey, and really this was of value in addition to our already existing key performance indicator report. We want to make sure that we're getting the voice of the customer, which is our patients, to know how their experience was, and making sure that that aligns with the service that we're providing and that we're enhancing service quality so that everybody's expectations match up. We had the provincial funding enhancements. I've already spoken of the $195,000 for the dedicated offload nurse program that's continuing on this year. And the province did an in-year adjustment of just shy of $270,000 additional for our land ambulance service grant. So that allowed us to get a little bit closer to actual spending versus council approved budget for the previous year. So it did a better job in catching us up to that 50%. I'm being a little bit anticipatory here, but I should say, Deputy Chief Lucas has been sitting on a variety of committees and working very diligently in the background to plan the medical support for the International Plowing Match that's upcoming in a few weeks. It's a very exciting event that's happening in the community. We're pleased to be a part of it, and Deputy Chief Lucas has been a champion in the background in terms of the medical support at that event. So thank you for that. There's lots of priorities that will be forthcoming in the budget binder for 2025 or the upcoming year. I've pulled a couple of the ones that are going to require the most time, energy, resources from our entire team to make sure that we're able to execute well, effectively, efficiently, and delivering good quality work on those things. The first is really beginning construction of the paramedic service headquarters and fleet center. We're in need of that facility. We're busting at the seams and really need to get going on that project. So that's all hands on deck and making sure that that project stays on track and proceeds. There is something called the Medical Priority Dispatch System. You may have heard of this as MPDS looming in the background. It is an overhaul or a modernization of the 911 dispatch system, specifically for ambulance. The current system, when you call 911, the dispatcher asks a limited number of questions and assigns an ambulance to that response. Typically, what's happened, because it's based on a limited number of questions, is they over-prioritize or tend to over-prioritize calls. So about 90% of the calls that were going out on lights and sirens for were not returning lights and sirens to the hospital. That over-prioritization creates some challenges in terms of reassigning to a more important call. Once you're assigned to that call, you can't leave for a more important call. So medical priority dispatch is a robust triage tool to ask a significant amount of more questions to the caller and assign the most appropriate resource to the most appropriate person. So it's intended for the most critical patients to receive a very timely response and to have ambulances available for that. And for those that can wait, they may be waiting for an ambulance. So it's about optimization of the resources that you have when there's more volume than ambulances available, which is the situation that we're in right now. Deputy Chief Lucas talked about bargaining a new collective agreement for OPSU Local 371. That's our paramedic bargaining unit, and that will expire the end of this year. And always on task for all of us, our department, the CAO Council is advocating for and strategizing ways to secure ongoing funding for those initiatives like Community Paramedic Offload Nurse Program that are so important to make sure that we're keeping up with that growth curve. So last few slides here, we brought a report forward in the spring that really talked about paramedic performance in general and how the department was operating. And we know from that report, we know from the Paramedic Service Master Plan that ourselves, not unlike emergency services and probably a lot of other departments in general, are under significant system pressures, mainly from the increased volume and growth, but from some other system pressures as well, specifically for us, offload delay that takes our resources and holds them for long periods of time. So we know that that's having more collective impact in other areas of service, things like Code Zero or not having enough resources or ambulances available. And we're really relying back on the paramedic service master plan, the recommendations, and as well as those trigger points, like not having, or being in code 0, not having those ambulances available to say this is the time for resource adds. So we've had a lot of support from council, from the public, from everybody in general in regards to that. And I think our asks are necessary, they're timely, and they are in line with the paramedic service master plan in general. The operating pressures, I think we've already spoken of those, and I know Deputy Chief Lucas talked about just inflation, supply chain delays, and things that are being managed in the background on a regular basis. So I think this is my last slide, but I did want to just introduce generally the positions that are being requested for 2025. Deputy Chief Lucas currently manages all logistics, and our logistics technician, which is the employee that does all of that work. And it really is a pressure point. It's a lot of work. We have 29 vehicles, over 1 million kilometers traveled a year, lots of legislated, regulated standards in terms of preventative maintenance for vehicles and equipment. And we really need somebody in that department to support operations and logistics. And in line with the paramedic service master plan, we're asking for 4 full-time paramedics in 2025, and that's to expand ambulance coverage during the night shift. So unfortunately, we're not just busy through the day. Night shifts tend to be a peak time as well, and is increasing as years go on. We dropped down to 5 ambulances on nights, and we're asking to expand that coverage to have an additional vehicle at night to 6, and that would be across the city of Kawartha Lakes. Oh, I lied. There is one more. This one got added yesterday, but these are just recording and the way costs and expenses are recorded. So they look like changes to the operating budget. They might just be shifted from one budget to another. Computer software, previously that it was budgeted in IT, it's now being reallocated to the department to qualify for the 50% funding. The dedicated offload nurse program, that's a transfer to external clients that comes in 100% grant funding and then flows out. And the WSIB costs, I think we've covered that at length in terms of an increase to the salary, wages, and benefits line. So that is all for our formal presentation, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Chair. I have a lot of questions, but they're all friendly questions. So I'll just go through. Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, it was very good. Thank you. The collaborative agreements, it's my understanding in the Seagrave portion of Kawartha Lakes, we have Port Perry, I think, addresses that problem. So is there an agreement there as well, or is it, like, how does that work?
Through the chair? Yep. There is no formal cross-border agreement with Durham Region Paramedic Services. The only formal agreement that we have is with Haliburton County. We would be paying Durham Region rather than receiving money from Durham, in terms of they service a very large amount of calls in the western area of Kawartha Lakes, specifically Manila, Little Britain, Cannington, and we would be a net payer to Durham Region.
And that's the 150,000 to external clients. That's what that's about.
That's correct. That's the transfer to Haliburton County.
Thank you. Question two, sorry, Deputy Golden. Paramedics, do you demand a certain number of CE hours per year? And if so, what would that be?
Yep, we do. Each year, all paramedics are actually required to do 2 8-hour days of our what we would consider in-service education. So twice a year we do that, and twice a year each paramedic is also required to attend 8 hours at our base hospital CMEs. So there's a significant amount of education that is delivered to them. At our in-services, typically we're dealing with very service-specific equipment. We're dealing with updates from our chief and our other, both deputy chiefs. We're dealing with updates from community paramedicine, making sure the staff are all up to date. We're even having a health and safety portion at our next CME. So we try to include a lot of different components to our in-service education. But each paramedic will have 16 hours of that.
Very good to hear. Thank you. Just curious on the collective agreement to Deputy Lucas, is it 2, 3, 4, 5 years? What's the typical, or is there a typical? Just curious.
It's typically negotiated. We usually at least 3 to 4 years, but it is a negotiation point, depending if it maybe goes to arbitration. If it gets to that point, then they may extend it a bit longer, and then there's those retroactive concerns that may come up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. This comes back to you, Chief Johnson, is supply chain. It's still affected from the pandemic. It's still affecting our purchases of equipment.
It is, and I think it probably impacts operations, Deputy Chief Lucas, a little bit more. But ambulances, for example, there's one certified vendor in Ontario, Crestline Demers, and we're waiting about, they say 18 to 24 months. It's at least 24 months for delivery. So you'll see an early start request coming forward at council next week, just as a strategy to put that order in the queue so we can get ahead, because right now we have 7 or 8 units, ambulances over 300,000 kilometers, and we're seeing increased costs related to preventative maintenance, transmissions, all of those engines, things that are quite costly to repair. So at least 24 months for an ambulance, and there's lots of other delays other than that are still impacting our general operation.
Wow, thank you. The WSIB at 11%, how does that compare to similar regions? Are we in the middle, low, high?
We're about the same. It's pretty standard across, in terms of industry trend, paramedic service specifically. We did a little survey amongst the eastern region, which is 13 services from Halliburton ourselves over right through to Cornwall, Ottawa. People are hitting in the 10% category of staff that are off work. Now, I want to make sure that 11% of the staff that we have off work is not all WSIB. 5 to 6% are WSIB. There's some maternity, paternity leaves in there. There's some short-term claims in there as well. So the WSIB related component of the 11% of staff that we have off is about 5 or 6%.
Interesting, thank you. In a previous presentation, you've really showed us the increase in calls, which is rising faster than our population. And we have to address those calls. You can't just ignore them. I get that, and that's putting pressure on why we have to hire more paramedics. Is there a higher percentage of nonsense calls happening there? And just wondering, if so, if we put money into education to try to damp down the calls that only happen when you really need an ambulance service, if you could comment on that.
Sure. A lot of the calls are over prioritized, or right now they're assigned as an urgent or emergent response. So it's hard to really filter or flush out, which ones are, we know a very small percentage are coming back to the hospital through lights and sirens or an emergency response back to hospital. MPDS is going to help a little bit with that, as well as public education. There's lots of different provincial campaigns that I think are important to review and see if they have value here in Kawartha Lakes. Campaigns like Is Your Urgency an Emergency? And public media campaigns to make sure that ambulances are used for the most critical patients, and that there's ambulances available for those calls. So generally speaking, I think our utilization of ambulance per capita or per 1,000 people in Kawartha Lakes is higher. We also have an older population, so it's hard to weed out what's what. More of City of Kawartha Lakes population uses ambulance than the average. That's what we know.
Thank you for that. So the critical question though is, do you think if we put more money into education, do you think that would help reduce the number of calls per 1,000?
Can't hurt. It can't hurt. I don't know if there's going to be a one solution to that question. I think it's a really good question that we ask ourselves and that we take back to our department. Education, we have to do lots of different things to get ahead of the curve, because we can't just add paramedics to volume. There has to be other strategies working upstream, things like community paramedicine, new models of care where we're not taking patients to hospital where we don't have to. That probably has a bigger impact than public education, but it's a whole host of solutions that we need to be doing to be able to be working towards some solution to mitigate that growth curve.
Yep, thank you for that, because we actually are going to increase in population.
Yeah.
Literally, so that will increase calls too. My last question is just a request on the slide with your budget there. Fully understand the increase. I'm in the wrong slide here. Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, the 1.6 million in salaries, wages, and benefits. If we could just get a breakdown of what piece is WSIB, not today, if you can email it, WSIB, the new positions, and just the increase in annual salaries. It'd be great, but it all looks good from my perspective. So.
Sure, and we do have those details. I was working with finance yesterday to actually break apart that number to figure out what was what. But I can forward it for sure, make sure that those numbers are correct and forward it to the budget committee.
I think it just helps us with better understanding what you're dealing with, right? So thank you.
Councillor Richardson.
I need to go first on these questions. No, thank you. Thanks very much for the presentation. And we certainly can't thank you enough for you and all your team, what you do for our communities. Couple quick questions. The 4 new paramedics, the 1 additional ambulance, is that you're looking for a new ambulance with those 4 positions as well?
We are not looking for an ambulance. So the ambulance and equipment already are there. We're looking for personnel only.
Perfect, thank you. And how many ambulances are you still waiting for based on that supply chain? Because I know there's a bit of a backlog, so I'm just curious where you are on that.
We have 7 in the queue right now with deposits paid, going back to 2022. So we're 2 years behind now. Our first 2 were supposed to come February of 2025, and then another 2 in March. We have received 2 remounts, so I'd love to get to the point where at least our frontline ambulances are within 2 years or newer. And like we're saying, we're presenting this early start, which will hopefully at the 2-year mark of our requirement, we put in that deposit. So our queue time is not when we need them. It's when they'll be ready when we get them 3 years later. We did get an email today from the Crestline Demers that they're opening up a 2nd division in their plant for remounts and new vehicles. Right now they're combined, and they're hiring staff. They're promising that we will see an improvement on that, but we're still 7 behind right now, and we're going to put 6 more in the queue if this early start goes through. So that'll be, I think we'll have 13 of our 15 ambulances in queue, so hopefully we can do an improved result in that. And just to mention about the lower acuity calls that you were talking about, the MPDS system, we have what's called green, which is the lowest priority. And what they'll do, our dispatcher will inform them that they could wait up to 4 hours. And then in services that have implemented this have noticed that's the people will say, well, you know what, I'll just drive myself. So that may be beneficial. We'll have to get some data to see if that's working, but I think that will help us.
Sorry, back to the ambulance then. So if you guys have paid your deposit and once they put them into production, are they sending you the adjustments of how much more they are going to be as of yet? Because I know everybody in that supply chain, like you think you've locked in a price, you pay your deposit, but when you get your invoice, you're way over. I just wondered if you have any gauge on that.
The vendor can and will likely requote up to 90 days before the unit goes into production. So you do not lock in pricing when deposit's paid.
another big pressure that we have to take into consideration. So thank you for that. I'm of the same mindset too when we talk about education, and I'm not saying that it comes down to you, but I think that new medical priority dispatch system that you're looking at will definitely, I think, be a real potential game changer for you folks answering, going on those calls, but also to the residents too as well. So that's probably a good news story in itself, because that's the one thing that you hear on a continuous basis when you're a counselor is, the call volume and reprioritizing calls in the 911 system. There seems to be some issues with that. So no, I've got most of my questions answered through Councillor Joyce, so thank you. And again, thank you to everyone.
Oh, thank you for that. And just parting comment maybe, but we recognize it's not always the time for a staffing ask. We recognize that that has to be balanced corporately, and there's lots of departments asking for personnel. We are really relying back on the master plan and those trigger points of knowing when the system is strained. The paramedic service master plan recommended this initial catch-up of the night shift, and then from subsequent ask is, unless things change or volume dramatically increases, that it's an addition of a 12-hour unit every other year. So that's 4 paramedics every other year. So I recognize it's not always, going to the well and asking, and just making sure that those requests are timely, that they're necessary, and that, we're not always here with our hand out looking for something. So I just wanted to put that in there.
Thank you. Well, no one can argue how important your services are needed, and so we thank you very much for your team and your staff, what you do for our community. I have one question on the WSIB. A few of them were answered, but the types of injuries that you have, you say 5%, but you said maternity and short term is WSIB. Why would that be in that 11%?
So I, just for clarification, I had mentioned that 11% of our full-time staff are off work right now. They're out of the workplace. It's like 5.8% are WSIB related. Another almost 5% are for maternity and paternity leave. And then the remainder are short-term claims that are still not filtered one way or another. So it's 11% in total. But the WSIB, like I was hurt at work, illness or injury, mental health or physical, is about 6%.
And on that WSIB, I've got quite a bit of information, but I worked for them for a while. So that's all, every injury in that is based on the injury, and your premiums are based on how many people you have off for work. So basically you work at your premiums every year. So if you have more people off, your premiums are going to go up. So the type of injuries you have, that 5%, is there ergonomic issues? I'm sure you're probably looking at that, the things that if it's something that we can do better to make sure people don't get hurt and so on. I'm sure you're probably working on that, but it's a comment, so.
I appreciate the comment. It is a complex issue. Most of them are mental health related claims. And that's an education piece back to the paramedic service all the time, trying to, decrease stigma, increase awareness, and make sure that our workers are healthy and well in the workplace where they can be, and returning to work as soon as they can, but off work when they're not able to perform the duties of a paramedic. So costs are increasing, and like I mentioned, most of those are legacy historical claims where employees are actually performing other work either inside of the city or out, and paramedic services paying that top up and healthcare related costs for those employees. They might be working but getting paid less somewhere else in the city or out, and paramedic service is responsible for the top up component of those WSIB related costs. So they're not ever returning. They're healthy and well, which is what matters, but that has long-term financial impact to the department.
So out of that 5%, how many would be on, like I'm sure you offer light duty people that can do it. So out of that 5%, how many people would actually be doing a function, a light duty work and so on out of that 5%?
None of them. None of them right now. All of them are out of workplace.
Very good. Second one is that I still can't believe that that we have to wait that long for vehicles. It's just, I've been in the production business most of my life, and with the amount of vehicles that are you're waiting for that long, you just can't believe they can't make another shift or a third shift or something to build these vehicles. It's unbelievable.
It is a frustration, and it's across the province. And our solution is we're trying to open or have conversations with the ministry to maybe lessen the standards so that we can improve maybe some American competitors. But we met with a fellow from the Priority Dispatch, which is part of the MPDS program, and he says they're waiting 2 years as well. So I don't even think that's a solution. Now, it was good news today that they are adding production in another facility. So hopefully we'll see that, but I think that's a long ways away yet. But there should be a time where we can catch up to this, but it's going to take a while. Yeah. And I apologize for Sarah bringing up the international plowing match. I know you got a lot on your plate.
Yeah, I really didn't like that word this morning, but I do down here. I do appreciate the Deputy Lucas for all the work you've done in helping us out. So thank you very much for that, because you've been a big part of it. So. And one other comment I have is that this offload dedication of nurse, Lindsay's a small town, and you've done a great job, because I can remember driving by many times and seeing 7, 8 ambulances there. And when they're there, that means their service is not out on the road. And I drive by and I don't see that many there. So obviously it's working, and it's a good program, and job well done on that one, because I get a lot of comments when people call you and say, how come there's 7 or 8 ambulances at the hospital? And that definitely has helped the process for sure. So good work. So again, thank you today for all you to come up and do a presentation. And could I have a motion to receive the budget presentation? Councillor Joyce, second by Councillor Richardson. Thank you. And could I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor. Oh, sorry. Maybe it just felt that long. I was looking farther ahead, so. Okay, how about we take 15 minutes and wait for the next group to come. Okay, thank you. Okay, call the meeting back to order. And we'll call 4.2, the departmental budget presentation for development services. Leanne Berry. For the people who are watching, we're just running into some technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have it fixed.
We have pivoted, we found a workaround, it's how we roll. Mr. Chair, thank you and good morning. In fact, we are now well into the afternoon, and I fully recognize I'm keeping everybody from lunch, so we will move through things as expeditiously as possible. What a difference a year makes. So, development services continues to evolve through what I'm still calling a significant transitional year. Of course, following our former director, Richard Hawley's retirement at the end of 2023, and me, of course, stepping up to work with this exceptional management team. With me today is Chief Building Official Suzanne Murchison, who leads the Building and Septic Division, along with our Supervisor of Part 8 Sewage Systems, Ann Elmhurst, on the other side of the room, and our newly appointed Supervisor of Plans Review and Inspections, Matt McKinnon. We've got our Manager of Economic Development beside me here, Rebecca Mustard. We have two newer faces from planning who both joined the corporation this year. Our Manager of Planning, John Connolly, and our Policy Supervisor, Mark Joel. And of course, the woman who has played a critical role, essentially helping me navigate the director's portfolio for the first time, coordinating my meeting schedule, returning calls, conveying messages on my behalf, being my bodyguard, generally keeping me in check and smiling mostly, all in addition to supervising the planning division's administration team, our executive assistant, Wendy Ellis. So, Mr. Chair, this professional team, and by extension the entire department of 52 full-time staff, has been patient, helpful, informative, and kind, and all that amidst an ever-evolving client base, the public, our community. We have remained diligent yet nimble to address the changing needs and development interests and continue to look for ways to deliver our services at the highest possible standard. In planning's case, new opportunities to do just that are being explored through the Deputy Mayor's Service Turnaround Initiative. So team, thank you. Thank you. You'll be hearing from our division managers as they take us through their division overviews, this year's accomplishments, next year's priorities, and then I'll spend a few more minutes wrapping up to touch on the budget pressures that we anticipate. In development services, as we can see on the slide, we're responsible for providing leadership, guidance, and direction to ensure efficient and effective administration, delivery, and operations of programs and services that support growth and development. We do this in part through our administration and coordination of several city committees, task forces, and boards, and of course those also include a number of citizen volunteers. To give you an idea, those include the Planning Advisory Committee, the Committee of Adjustment, the Heritage Advisory Committee, the Agricultural Advisory Committee, our Environmental Advisory Committee, the Cultural Center Task Force. At this point, they have already concluded their work, but we have been working quite closely with the Rural Zoning Bylaw Task Force, the Active Transportation Plan Task Force, the Growth Management Strategy Task Force, and the Downtown Lindsay BIA. So taking a look at our financial summary, I will speak to the department as a whole, and then of course invite the managers to do the same for their respective divisions. Our friends in Corporate Services Treasury have supported this work by summarizing our finances into sort of two key categories here, of course. So one being the revenue stream and the second being our expenses. Under the revenue stream, we bring in funds mainly through grants and other sources, building permits and development applications. So while we've seen a decrease in the ECDEV grants over the last couple of years, we do anticipate some new opportunities through next year. Similarly, slower activity from development applications impacting permit activity, while planning bounces back from a significant staffing deficit the past few years. So with expanding our contracted services to add Dillon Consulting to the work WSP and independent consultant Bruce Stickney have been doing the past year and a half, we are picking up steam on the application processing front, and we can see a real uptick in revenue anticipated for next year. This, of course, is going to be critical to support development of complete communities and to work towards our housing pledge being 6,500 dwelling units by 2031. In my opinion, the outlook is brighter with an increased revenue stream overall. So under expenses now, our largest generator is staff salaries and benefits provided by the corporation. With the addition of new staff, we can anticipate this account to reflect that increase. The next highest generator is the contracted services, predominantly charged by planning to provide the external bandwidth that we're continuing to recruit for internally. Economic development has their share of consultants engaged in project work as well. We are anticipating a small dip in the field of training and professional development. Now, that's not because we're encouraging less of this, quite the opposite. We highly value the positive impacts this has on staff. So although you'll see the building and septic budget increase in this regard for 25, that's resulting from some changes in legislation that Suzanne will speak to further. The post-COVID world is offering a lot more opportunity for hybrid conference attendance, altogether virtual webinar events, pretty great alternatives to in-person attendance. And so these are things that in planning in ECDEV's case, we're really taking a closer look at. Ultimately requires less funding in that part of our budget. Finally, a relatively small uptick projected by ECDEV in the field of external client transfers for project work that Rebecca will speak to a little further. On balance, we'll see this summarized in the upcoming variance slide, with our overall draft budget currently living at the $4.387 million budget. For 2025, it's an increase of just over $605,000. Largest variance generator being our wages and benefits, which won't come as a surprise to any of you. All right, so with that, and I guess there's not a whole lot of need for us to shift around as we're all here and ready to go, I'll invite Suzanne to speak to the Building and Septic Division overview.
Thank you, Leah. Through the chair, I would like to first give you a quick overview of the different aspects of our department. So we are responsible to administer and issue building permits, demolition permits, sewage system permits, accessory dwelling unit registration, pool and sign bylaw permits. We issue building and septic compliance letters for sale of property. And we do quite a lot of search of records for residents that are looking to get their hands on documents from our archives. With respect to our budget overview for 2025, I'm not going to assume that everyone is aware, but our budget is a self-funded department, so we zero out at the end of the day. So we have to adjust our building permit fees to ensure that they're covering all our costs required. We have a process set up that there is also an indirect piece to our costs as per the legislation, where I think our number we are sitting at with finance is about 20%. So our operating budget, we take 20% of that value and we redistribute that cost through to other operating budgets for other departments that we get benefit from. So we have things like building and property, our leased space, things like that. The changes that we're looking at for 2025 are mostly staff-related as well. We added a single position in 2024 that we won't actually recognize until 2025 because we were looking at having one inspector was off on a paternity leave. So we took the opportunity rather than try in vain to hire a temp, which is something we were never successful at for a building inspector position. We hired that person replacement as a full-time replacement, and it won't be until July of 2025 that we actually see that change. So that'll show up in this budget for salaries. As well, we requested additional inspector and clerk position for 2025 to work towards the development pressures that we're going to see, hopefully, with our building faster numbers that are coming our way. The other large item that would be a change to our budget would be we have a new code cycle. So there's a new Ontario Building Code that is to be printed in late October of this year. So we will be whenever they're ready, and they're never usually on time, but it goes into force and effect January 1, so we have to purchase large quantity of building code books either late this year or early next year when they're available, and then we have to do the associated training that goes along with that, so we've had to increase our training budget slightly for covering that item. I think that's it for me.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
I'll invite Rebecca to speak to the group next. Rebecca, thank you.
Thanks, Leah. So the Economic Development Division, we are here supporting the local economy and the business community by supporting growth and investment across all of Kawartha Lake's key sectors as identified in the Economic Development Strategy: manufacturing, agriculture, arts, culture and heritage, tourism and innovation. The economic development program that you have as a city is a very comprehensive and well-regarded program across the province, and it's delivered by 11 full-time staff at the moment. So including myself is one admin assistant, Jen. We've got 3 business development and community economic development team members, Carly, Kelly and Lindsay. 2 staff who support our small business and entrepreneurship centre, being Diane and Sandy. 1 staff in leading our tourism program, Laurie, and there is an ask reflected in our wages and salaries here for additional support in tourism and to run our destination marketing organisation function. And 3 team members that support the heritage and culture portfolio, so Emily, Donna and Laura. When we look at this budget and we look at revenues, you'll see revenues look like they're, for this year, trending up. Sometimes they trend down on past years, and this really is a function of what programs currently are funded. We look for grant funding at any opportunity that we have, and what gets reflected in the budget is really related to what projects we have at any point in time and what signed agreements we have at any given point in time when the budget process is going through. Wages and salaries for us, and I just mentioned our team is about 60% of our entire expense and is looking to increase, partially related to the request for another position to support the tourism program and our destination marketing organisation function. When we look at materials, training and services and contracted services, rents and insurance, this is where we capture all of our work around the delivery of programming out into the community. So there is a little bit of a change in there. A lot of that is related to how we which accounts we're attributing different expenses to and switching some around so they better align with the description of some of those accounts. When we look at transfer to external organizations, external clients, this is a very large budget number coming out of the economic development budget. And this really includes quite a number of programs that council delivers out into the community to stimulate the local economy and the ecosystem and some businesses. So just to run through a couple of those to give you an idea of them, the $1 Million Makeover is the Community Improvement Plan program that has been in existence for quite a few years now. It's been a really successful program, and every dollar that council is providing out to the community is returning around $10 of private sector investment. This fund here also includes the Economic Development Fund that Council put forward in 2024 that speaks to the Summer Tourism Experience grant that we provide to our local chambers to support visitor information services on the ground in the communities. Our local Economic Development Fund to support operating expenses for nonprofit organizations, cultural facilities operating grant. It also includes the Small Business Centre grant structure of Start a Company and Summer Company, which is a flow through of funds from the province directly to businesses. And that covers the majority of the budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I'll invite John to speak to the Planning Division next. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. As the new old face around to the table, one of the things from a planning perspective, you realize that the description up here is manages and provides oversight of the regulatory processes for land use development, urban environmental design and protection, and enhancement of natural features. What does that mean from a transactional standpoint? Really, there are three larger buckets we can put that into. General inquiries, zoning information, compliance requests, information and advice, projects and policy development, something which probably council has seen a lot. Those would include the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, active transportation master plan, growth management strategy, and the official plan review and secondary plans, some of the settlements of that which have been going on for a while. Lastly, Planning Act applications. Those are official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendments, subdivisions, condominiums, site plans, minor variances, consents, deeming bylaws, pre-consultations. There are a number of those. Certainly from a council perspective, you'd be familiar with those in terms of what's going on there. All of that is done under the planning framework, which is something from a provincial level has changed a lot in the last few years, but we're optimistic, knock on wood, that with the province's announcement around a new provincial policy statement, changing the idea of a growth plan being eliminated and being migrating those policies into the provincial policy statement, that will provide some sort of consistency and a bit of a steady state for us to do our work. Been a lot of changes in the last few years, so hopefully with these changes, we can start to bring our planning documents and also our practices around that into a more formidable sort of way of dealing with these things. From a budgeting standpoint, probably one of the biggest things to highlight here is the idea of the expenses we have with respect to salaries and wages and contracted services. This is something that the director had pointed on earlier in terms of things that were in previous years and we're playing catch up. I keep using the term that we're hoping to get to a point of steady state. Certainly from a recruitment standpoint, we've been benefiting from the fact that we have Mark Joel, who's our policy supervisor. We have been going out and interviewing to fill the vacancy with respect to the supervisor for development. Again, we keep going to the market for that. We've had a number of other successful recruitments. We have a senior planner internally. We will be going externally with that. We have been interviewing for an environmental officer and hopefully have some good news there going forward. So we've been able to sort of promote within where there's been really good movement, have some strong candidates and people who are in that expertise within the team itself, and also trying to draw on the external to be able to get to that steady state. From the standpoint of what we're asking for next year, the highlight would probably be a planning technician. From our standpoint, I get copies on all emails with respect to daily inquiries, consent inquiries about zoning, compliance, information. It's a significant workload. The planning technician would be an addition to be able to help triage those things that would fit within, not only in terms of our customer service standard of within 2 days, but also be able to triage those requests and be able to focus that from a standpoint of pinpointing specific projects or information requests and be able to do that in a more, in a quicker fashion. From that, you have the budget in front of you, so if there are any questions.
All right, thank you very much, John. Suzanne, I'll invite you to prepare next. Oh, maybe not. I did jump ahead. We're trying to follow here in chronological order and keep things at least a bit consistent. Moving on to our 2024 accomplishments and 25 priorities, I just want to commend our management team and their respective divisions for actually accomplishing the 2024 priorities they brought forward last year. Every one of them. Terrific work, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, through the chair. So our 2024 accomplishments. Renovations occurred at the Coboconk office, which allowed for the expansion of our team complement. Previously, we had 3 staff people up at Coboconk, 2 inspectors and 1 zoning clerk, or building and zoning clerk, sorry. And now we've added a Part 8 septic inspector and the Part 8 supervisor to provide staff support. As well, we have an arrangement where the 2 supervisors are going to switch spots once a week, once every 2 weeks, so that they can, both interact with their team in Lindsay as well as their team in Coboconk to make more continuous assistance to the team. 2024 saw our inspector team proactively following up and closing approximately 1,500 files dating from 2001 through to 2024. A similar number was closed in 2023. And when we started this task about 4 years ago, we had 15,000 open permits at that time. And so it is a bit of a moving target because for every, couple hundred we close in a year, we also grow by permits as well. But we are definitely making headway in closing the old permits. It's a really good news story. In 2024, we shifted our records project, which has been ongoing since the initial Greenbelt project in 2015, I believe it was. And we just keep doing another phase. And so this year we've started working on the pre-amalgamation files, going through the boxes. We sort for content. If there's non-value added content, we're deeming those to be able to be destroyed through our retention bylaw. We're separating out our non-residential into their own file boxes. We're trying to match drawings up with applications, with supporting documents, things like that, so that we can get our all our staff and all our customers a better experience when it comes to looking for a record. Right now, it's a very manual process. We look for a needle in a haystack sometimes, and it chews up a lot of staff time looking. So we're going to go systematically municipality by municipality. We started with Town of Lindsay in 2024, and we, I think as of yesterday, we were working on 1976. We started in the year 2000. We have to go back to the late 50s. So we're getting there. It's some years go quicker than others. So then I thought I'd share a few stats with the committee because they are definitely accomplishments for all of us. Pending permits, we have approximately 500 across all permit types right now, with 270 housing units contained in that list. Issued permits for 2024, we've issued 924 building permits of all types, with 185 that are new housing. Sewage system permits, we've issued 303 across all types. The total value of construction to date for 2024 is approximately $171.5 million worth of construction. And in that is about $112 million in residential, $8 million in agriculture, and $50 million in non-residential. Our provincial tracker, which is through the Building Faster Fund, a function of the province, they're tracking housing starts. So as of last week, they've updated the tracker to tell us we have 200 housing starts so far for 2024. The housing pledge and the related Building Faster Fund funding ties into the operation of the Building and Septic Division as we're the trigger for the housing starts being counted by the province. So the permits are issued, construction commences, the province through CMHC counts the start and reports it into the pledge target. This process is connected to Building and Septic Division for timely permit processing, issuance, inspection, and reporting. This speaks to the importance of recruitment and retention of staff to maintain service levels. Currently, we're experiencing 2 vacancies. So the team is doing great for keeping up to date. I have to commend my team. Every time we've had vacancies, everybody throws their name into the ring and we kind of pitch in and fill those vacancies temporarily. And that's it for 2024 accomplishments. I don't know if you have any questions before I move on. Okay, move on to 2025 priorities. So we're working towards introducing an online permit option. with eventually going to a paperless permitting system. We hope that that's going to happen in 2025. Staff have worked very hard in 2024 drafting a completely overhauled building and septic division webpage. It's with CAM right now for approval, but we hope to have it maybe by the end of the year going online. And through that overhauled webpage, we have created a number of permit portal permit forms so that we can start. It's less efficient than what we would like it to be, but it's going to be better than what we are now, which is completely paper-based. So we will, instead of having a paper copy come across our desk, sit on our desk and be typed in, it will show up through an email, a dedicated email, and staff will have it up on their screen, type it into the system. We won't be generating paper anymore, which is going to be a big savings. We'll do our plans review using our Bluebeam software that we purchased last year to try and assist with this. And then the ultimate dream is to have the public portal through CityWorks. And so we're just in the early stages of testing out one template at this point, because there's a bit of technical hiccups there for getting us all of our templates, but eventually we hope to work through to 2025 to get hopefully all of our templates into that public portal, which is about 37 different permit types that we bucket people into. We're also going to be completing the establishment of the 2 building and septic division hubs in early 2025. So the last piece to that, once we get Coboconk settled, we will work towards getting the OMIMI inspector moved into the Lindsay team so that we will have two teams that work together as a start to finish for the customer. It will give the customer the best experience because they are getting Monday to Friday, 8 hours a day, they can come into either one of those offices and talk to a building department staff person. Whereas our old model that we've, slowly seen change, had satellite offices with an inspector on their own. So when they were out in the field for 7 of their 8 hours, there was no access to the public for that person. So we think this is a good news story to develop these 2 hubs. It's definitely been working in that fashion over the last 11 months while the Coboconk office has been closed, and we've had the entire team, save and except the OMIMI inspector, in Lindsay. We've been able to shift a bunch of our focus to breaking up the process for the customer into certain job aspects so that you can do the front end with a clerk, and then you do the permit review and issuance through the inspector, and then through to the life cycle of your permit to the end. And then 2025, we will continue the momentum of the historic permit file closure project and the pre-amalgamation records cleanup. Included in this endeavor is to clean up the historic health unit databases. We're going to be merging the 3 databases into a single SharePoint solution and prepare for the eventual transfer of all the paper records from the health unit, which will allow City of Kawartha Lakes staff to digitize missing components and eventually result in a more complete database. And that is all I have.
Hey, Rebecca, tell us about your accomplishments and priorities.
Hey, so 2024 was a great year for the economic development team. One of the key priorities of this year has been to coordinate the municipal contribution to the International Ploughing Match and Rural Expo. That will be held in just under 2 weeks at the Lindsay Fairgrounds, October 1 to the 5th. This has really been a team effort, and economic development has been coordinating municipal contribution from across the municipality. And so a huge thank you to all of the staff that have contributed to making this possible and beyond the staff. One of the features of the International Ploughing Match and Rural Expo is that there will be a Showcase Kawartha Lakes display at the event that will showcase what is going on in Kawartha Lakes. And we have city staff from across the city that are coming to be part of that. We've got partners from various different organizations that are stepping up to make this a great event. We've got 14 manufacturers who are thrilled to be showcasing products that are made in Kawartha Lakes. Fleming College, Ag Simulators are planning to be there, and Chambers of Commerce and the BIA will be featuring our fantastic downtowns. So I encourage all of you to come to that event, and I know that most of you are already involved in it. So that is a huge thank you and will be accomplished very shortly. The development of the Municipal Cultural Program and the Cultural Centre Feasibility Study Phase 2 has been another priority of 2024. The recommendations from the consultants and Council's Cultural Centre Feasibility Task Force are planning to come to Committee of the Whole with recommendations before the end of the year to provide Council with some decisions to make around a cultural centre and moving that project forward. So we're up to a really significant milestone as we see the conclusion of phase 2 of this project, and carriage for this project will start to shift from economic development and the feasibility phases of this work over to our building and property team to proceed with this project. And at that point, economic development will remain as a cheerleading champion for that work. We have also been working on an economic development strategy refresh. So this is a refresh to the 2017 work. The strategy has been completed by McSweeney and Associates in conjunction with staff and the community at large. We've had some really great and we're very grateful for the input from the local business community and local business organisations that have been very generous with their time and their comments into this process. So that will be coming forward to Council before the end of the year as well. The Development Concierge Program is also listed up here as a priority. This year, the Economic Development team has worked with over 55 businesses and regularly meets with almost 20 local and provincial organisations that support the local business economy. The Development Concierge is a real subset of that, where we give a white glove service to high priority economic development impact development projects. And so the team has worked with 6 businesses over this year, primarily in the manufacturing industry, that would be bringing some significant employment opportunities to the municipality. These are big projects, long-term, and so they will take a while before we actually see an outcome from them, but that work continues. So for 2025, we are focusing on implementing the refreshed economic development strategy that we will have by the end of the year. And what we do know right now is that a significant task will be to support investment into Kawartha Lakes, whether it's investment specifically in business startups through a small business centre, the retention and growth of our local business community, or attracting new businesses to the community. And we will continue to deliver really great and excellent programming in destination marketing, in heritage and culture. What we are also, as a third point bullet up here, the Cultural Centre Feasibility Study, Council is going to receive by the end of the year recommendations from the task force and consultants on a significant chunk of that work. There is funding received by the Green Municipal Fund to consider, for Council to consider whether a net zero build for that project is a feasible option. And so that will be coming forward mid-2025 with those results. And that's what we're looking forward to for 2025.
Rebecca, thank you. And John, to sum up accomplishments and priorities for planning, please.
Sure. So building on the good relationships, the work we do with other departments, the division itself is a combination of admin assistants do a lot of work. On top of that, we have planner 1s, planners 2, senior planners, an environmental officer, which we're hoping to be able to recruit and be able to announce that recruitment soon. 2 supervisors, one of which is vacant, but at the same time, we're going to be looking at trying to see if we can fill that. Mark, who's been here since the beginning of the year, has been very helpful on the policy side. Working with Max and the environmental officer will help with that. And then again, myself. So from our accomplishments, new staff recruitment, training, and onboarding, that's something that's been ongoing. It's with myself being part of that cadre. It's one of those things that we've been working forward. And again, next year, we're hoping to be able to complete that. On top of that, something that Council will be very familiar with is the rural zoning bylaw. This is work that happened over a number of years. It was presented to Council and approved by Council. Notwithstanding that, it was also appealed. So unfortunately, with those appeals, that's one of the things that sort of stops it in its track. But one of the things that the division has been doing, and this is really under the leadership of Mark Jewell, has been looking at how we can work with the Ontario Land Tribunal, and essentially looking at arbitration, of looking at those appeals, seeing if there's an opportunity to be able to work towards some kind of mediated or settlement ahead of that. So we're optimistic. It's a new approach that we're trying. There's been some good work and good discussions with those appellants. And again, we go forward. We just got a letter today with a case number from the OLT, Ontario Land Tribunal, for people who are watching, with the idea of sitting down and having those formal processes kick in. But at the same time, there have been some really good discussions which may be able to settle at least some of these appeals, we're hoping. On top of that, the Active Transportation Master Plan is another bit of work that was presented and finalized and approved by Council this year as well. On top of that, we have a date in October before the Ontario Land Tribunal. This would be a lot of work done by Leah and company before, which is the resolution of the appeals for the Bobcaygeon and the Omemee secondary plan. A lot of heavy lifting has gone on those two files. We're hopeful and optimistic that those will be resolved as a result of settlements and those hearings, and that's scheduled for October. So almost there, not quite an accomplishment. So maybe I'm counting things before they're finished, but that's certainly where we look that it should be done by year end. Another thing is a great deal of work has been going on with our work within departments, but also Watson Associates with respect to completing our growth management strategy. We have a memo that's with staff, that's actually with myself right now, to revise that. We're hoping to, as we had promised before, to bring this to council soon. So again, those are a number of different initiatives that have taken a number of years in some cases. It's a lot of great precursor work. It's also some of the things that we do where we work well with other departments, so that the work that we do as a division also enables and complements some of the work being done by other divisions. From 2024, those are some of our accomplishments. So looking forward to our priorities for next year. Again, one of the things that was in the strategic plan and is certainly identified as a priority from the corporation standpoint is the existing healthy environment plan. This is, again, the environmental officer, but under the work that on the policy shop under Mark, is the idea of looking at and transforming that, changing that into a climate change strategy. So that'll be a number one priority. It's not only a corporate one, but a divisional and departmental one. Given the work that we've done on the growth management strategy, some of the other work of other departments with respect to servicing and transportation, as well as the active transportation, we're now going to start work on the official plan review. With the settlement of those secondary plans and other appeals on the previous one, we now have to start some work, and that work will take a number of years in terms of the official plan. So those are some of the background studies, work that will have to be done in order to update the work that is needed to refresh the official plan or start a new official plan. That's something we have to look at. That means initiating and looking at requests for proposals, work that needs to be done. We have some studies that we've identified under the special projects with respect to things like the urban zoning bylaw review, commercial land supply, natural heritage systems. These are all background studies that build on the growth management strategy and other studies of other departments to go into the exercise of actually coming up with a new official plan. With that also is some of the work in terms of commencing the urban zoning bylaw review and an update of that. We did the rural zoning bylaw. The next piece is looking at the urban and the idea of a community planning permit system.
All right, so reflecting back to anticipated budget pressures for the current year, in the 2024 update to the city's consolidated fees bylaw, Council increased the development application fees as a way to address our anticipated budget pressures and really to provide for more realistic cost recovery. We are getting better positioned to monitor outcomes as we ramp up with our application processing, both internally and, of course, with the support of our external consultants. Another pressure was the integration of various technologies to allow staff to work more effectively, efficiently, to better coordinate the different division systems, to digitize all aspects of the development approvals process. This continues to be something we're working towards with our friends across the corporation, certainly in corporate services, as part of a broader modernization program and with funding support through the province's Building Faster Fund. My fingers are crossed, my toes are crossed. Looking ahead, we are anticipating our pinch points to be tied to our reliance on contracted services and the rising costs associated with consulting work to meet our legislative requirements, to meet our operational needs, and to complete our special projects. By extension, there is some degree of unpredictability associated with decision-making and what results. On occasion, we've heard about the rural zoning bylaw, of course, but on site-specific decision legal challenges as well. Changes in provincial legislation can pop up mid-year and impact our day-to-day operations as well as the work we do on our special projects. We saw this when the Easter Bunny delivered a new draft provincial planning statement in, April 2023. However, that is now firmed up and has been announced. It will come into play October 20th of this year. And as the manager of planning indicated, this is to replace the 2020 provincial policy statement and the 2019 growth plan. Those types of changes can impact things like completing projects. Specifically, in planning's case, that was the growth management strategy that we had anticipated bringing for finalization sooner, but really needed to take the time to assess the impacts from the changes in provincial policy. Another element that is out of the municipality's direct control is the issuance of zoning orders by the minister. So they do have direct impacts to planning and development municipally, but these aren't things that are accounted for because they aren't decisions that we are making locally. So all to say, and to recap where I started, we continue to be diligent, but of course have to remain nimble to be able to respond to these changes in real time. We really thank you for your attention. I am certainly cognizant of the time, but Mr. Chair, we are free and welcome to take your questions.
This is the time for questions. Okay, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, and through Chair. We certainly do recognize that you guys are the busy bee department, that's for sure, with all the changes with provincial bills and whatnot going on. We know that you're always bobbing and weaving. I just have a couple specific questions, if that works for you. Rebecca, just one when it comes to the economic department. I know that the grants have significantly gone down. I know some of that is the pandemic grants that were there originally. When you had made a comment regarding some of our initiatives that we have ongoing, the $1 million makeover, the economic development funds, these are, legacy funds that we have. Are these grant opportunities are not there just because they're older programs, or is there newer programs that the province is putting out that we don't necessarily go after that grant money just because we don't have those programs within the city? I'm just trying to see how the grant money flows, and is there opportunity for us to go after different grants if we offer, different programs within the city?
Through you, Chair. So a couple of things there. We have some pretty steady grants that come in. The Small Business Centre is one of them, although over time the amount of money that the province continues to provide for the operations of that program continue to decline a little bit. They've been pretty consistent in maintaining the funds that flow through us to businesses. So if it's a summer company initiative where students get a grant up to $3,000 to run a business over the summer, or start a company, which is for anybody that's going into business in the first 3 years, and they can receive up to $5,000. Those grants are pretty stable. There are some grants out there at the moment that would be for new programming, like the Skills Development Fund, which is all about workforce. That grant applications close in early October. The Rural Economic Development Fund is always there. We've currently got a project for a downtown revitalisation program with Fenelon Falls. So those sorts of project-related funds are still there. But when council specifically put in the Economic Development Fund, and particularly for the cultural facilities operating grant, that really was a decision of council that had come out of the Cultural Master Plan, noting that the provincial and federal landscape for funding for cultural organisations specific to operating was dwindling or non-existent. And so in a circumstance like that, where it's the municipality providing grants from the tax base or another funding source that's not a flow-through out into the community, council is stepping up to provide a gap of funding from other levels of government.
Thank you, and I do appreciate fleshing that out again, just showing that those are those pressures that we recognize in our community and have made, you know, concessions of making sure that we are engaging and moving different projects forward. So thank you for that answer. Maybe one question to John in planning. We see that the contracted services, you know, are driving up, but those revenues on applications are also driving up. Do you have a percentage of, in your, like, is there a balance that we're seeing, or we're still trying to play catch up?
I think what I can speak to is the current situation. If historically, maybe Leah can weigh in on this, but I think what we are trying to do, as I said, is we want to work towards a steady state. I do think with the idea that we have vacancies, we want to fill those well in time. Once they're filled, start to, I think, rely or change our reliance on external contracted services. So it's a bit of an over-under from that perspective. I think we, again, relying on WSP and Dylan in terms of as our external consultants. We have one other consultants doing work on consent. What I see is some of the work from one consultant is sort of tapering off. The other one is adding a little bit more. That would be with Dylan and WSP. Again, as we are going forward, the hope is that with filling these vacancies, we are moving internally. We have people who are certainly doing great work and they're advancing within that, but we do need a little bit more in that. So I hope I've answered your question with respect to that. I think we're catching up from historical things, but I think one of the benefits of all this is that through the contracted services, through the staff we have, the wait times or the backlogs are getting reduced. That's a good news story, and I think my hope is that as we work towards that steady state, this is one of those transitional years as we get to that.
So the one position we're looking for this year is the planning technician. And on that, how many vacant positions do we have currently sitting with?
Certainly. So we have a vacancy with the manager, the supervisor of development. We've gone out a few times to market. It's a difficult one, not only to fill because of the experience that we need for someone to be able to go into that role is development planning. There's policy and development. Policy, again, great support we have, but development is much more transactional. That's probably something council members hear a lot more. It's all those applications and all the work that goes on in terms of doing that. So we are not only trying to fill that, but we also have competition from other jurisdictions. There's the Ontario Provincial Planners Institute. They have a job board. Quite often we are competing for the same people. So it's a large pool, and it's a bit of a seller's market in that respect. So we do have a vacancy for the supervisor in development. We have a senior planner we're going externally, so that's another vacancy. We are interviewing and hopefully we'll be filling a vacancy for the environmental officer. The main focus of that work is the Healthy Environment Plan, which is the climate change strategy. And then on top of that, given some shuffling, we had one of our planner twos advance to a senior planner. So we will be looking internally to see if we can fill that planner two. If we can, that's great. If not, what that may create is a planner one. So vacancies, sorry, that's a long way around the block to answer your question. With supervisor development, we have a senior planner vacancy. We have potentially a planner one vacancy, and the planning technician job and the request, the ask of council is to be able to work with the hard work that the admin assistants do, but also act as that go-between between the planner ones to seniors and the other group that's in there to be able to help triage the application so that from a customer service and a file processing standpoint, be able to achieve more of the efficiencies that we're looking for.
Well, saying all that, I definitely want to recognize that as a counselor, you guys are making a difference, because we are the ones that are sometimes caught in the middle, and we're seeing the catch up. So I want to recognize that as well. So thank you very much. Just one more comment regarding the online permitting, which is a really great news through your department, Suzanne. And I know that you and I have had numerous conversations over the time, and I think this is going to be a game changer, and I appreciate the work that you've done on that. I think all of us will agree that, you know, when it comes to the wages, salaries, and benefits, we do recognize that recruitment and retention is on the top of our list when we're looking at this budget as well. So we do recognize that. And thank you, Rebecca, for reminding the Deputy Mayor about the International Flag Match coming in 2 weeks.
Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Chair. And I too want to make sure Deputy Mayor McDonald has the plowing match on his calendar. As a quick reminder. No, very good presentation. Thank you all. I also want to just take time to thank Ms. Murchison for, I had a great meeting with you and learned a lot about building permits, and with Ms. Elmhurst, I learned a lot about septic, and it's very helpful for me to answer questions to my constituents. A lot of my questions were answered through Councillor Richardson. I did want to lean into your staff complement problem, but I was going to ask what hurdles you were running into, and you kind of answered that. Is there anything else, any creative, you're struggling to fill those positions, I recognize that. Is there anything else we can do, any creative solutions that we can work together on to, get those positions filled? Because that's a bottleneck, that is a recognizable bottleneck. And what do we do?
That's a great question. Again, I don't want to diminish the work that we're doing with People Services. Michelle Asselstein is our Human Resources Officer, being great in terms of looking at some of the more traditional ways. Even Mark and myself as a team with Leah have sort of looked at how can we do things. I have actually taken time myself where, because I'm a new old face, being able to look at leaning on some of the network of people I've worked with to see if there's a way to be able to attract people from either current positions or people who I know are within that broader network who can do that. I've even offered to cut people's grass on weekends if that's what they need. I think corporately, as an employer, the organization is taking great steps, certainly in terms of from the wages standpoint and the more recent work that council has done with the union staff. I think that will make a big difference because there are competitions. There are certain things like for a supervisor of development, we have a good wage, we have a great working environment, we have a great community to offer, but sometimes the wages, if that was a factor, are 20,000+ more, and in some cases, may provide that same sort of thing. So again, looking at different opportunities, I know that some of the more traditional recruitment platforms we have, we're looking at different ways of incorporating their being able to go out and reach within within their algorithms to be able to reach out rather than waiting for people to come. I think we as a group, as a department or a division, also look at where we have connections, having those conversations to do it. It's a difficult one, but at the same time, I think those things will change over time. The number of jobs and vacancies through COVID in the planning area, I certainly know in the building, inspection, and engineering, some professions are significant, even in economic development. And so in those areas, we've just been a matter that there have been so many opportunities and vacancies, either through retirements or attrition or people just saying, this is it. So there has been that ability for people to be able to pick and choose what they want, and that's something that's hurt the organization, but at the same time, it's something we're trying to understand. So we do get a lot of applications. In some roles, we have to make sure that we put the right team together, and that even if we get 60, 70 applications in a job, which we will, most of them, a significant portion, are not suitably qualified. So we are getting the applications. That's not the right metric in terms of interest. So there is that traction, that visibility. It's the people who just don't have that background or the qualifications to do it. And again, I think we can keep on trying different strategies to do that. I think we're doing the best we can. We are getting close, and I think again on some of those vacancies we're doing that. And it's also retention. We have also some of those opportunities we've had are being able to move some of the people within the department who've been here for a few years, have that experience, being able to move up and recognize that, work at that higher level. So then the vacancy, rather than being at a senior, is going to maybe be at a planner 1 level, which is good because again, there may be more candidates at that level. So as the dust settles, my hopeful is that if I'm here next year giving that accomplishments, we'll say, you know what, we got there. So, and I also remember the plowing match because actually my oldest daughter's wedding reminds me that the plowing match is October 5th as well.
All right, very good. We got another marker for a reminder there. So, thank you for that. And I fully recognize the difficulties in recruitment. I've been with the Kawartha Lakes Healthcare Initiative for several years. It's difficult. Having said that, as we grow, it will get easier. As economic development does their work, which is a great, by the way, I just want to lean in on that too, is the Economic Development Department. Great work. it's one of the few departments that can brag about a recognizable return on investment. And so that's you're, you know, other departments must be very jealous of yours being able to demonstrate that kind of ROI. But good work on that, because when people look to start a business or move a business, it's not just about work, it's work, live, and play. And I think we have a lot to offer here. And in closing, thank you, Director Barry. Great work, great team. Thanks very much.
Okay, I have a couple. Start with Suzanne. You mentioned earlier there that a new building code cycle is coming. How often does a new building code come up, and how much training does that come every time they change it?
So in a perfect world, they're supposed to refresh the code every 5 years. Historically, through my career, we've seen that it stretches to 10 usually. So we're currently working on 2012 code. Came into force in effect, I believe, January 1st, 2014. It was a bit of a delay on that one, getting actually on the books. And so this one, yeah, we're another 10-year cycle, seeing a code come forward. There is over 2,000 code changes this time. So we have to get up to speed on over 2,000 changes to our book. Associated with that, they decided, or I'm not even sure, I think it was the feds stepped in and said that Ontario shall harmonize more with the federal code. So that's part of why we have this many changes this time. We're getting to be less of a Ontario-specific code and more of a blend to the national code. They're introducing a farm code, which we haven't had updated since 1997. So it's coming in as a new section into our building code. So that's something new for us to all learn as well. So yeah, there is significant training when they drop a new code like this. What we are really grateful for is that some of our bigger corporate or municipal partners, one namely being usually the City of Markham, will dedicate staff as soon as the legislation is dropped electronically, and they develop training courses, they develop a cross-reference document, and they've got that completed, and they're about to start. We call them road shows. The ministry has a road show, our association has a road show. These other municipalities are going to try and pitch in as well. So we have training coming from lots of different angles, and it's just a matter of getting everybody scheduled in, and we'll get everybody trained up.
Thank you. Next one is the short-term rentals. You know, as you know, we've changed it. We got a process for that. Is that causing more work for you as far as in the area of the septic and so on?
So yes, initially, when this was dropped on us beginning of this year, it was a huge increase to our workload. We were reviewing every single application as it came in to verify whether there was outstanding building permits, outstanding code issues with those building permits, outstanding sewage system. A lot of the applicants, and no fault of their own, came forward, you know, I have 5 bedrooms in my home, but reality was their septic permit back in the day was issued for 3. So we can't just give them a rubber stamp and say, go forward, because you're going to be damaging the environment. And that's one of our key, you know, strategies in the building department, is to protect that environment. So it was a huge workload. It took Anne offline pretty much full time for several weeks when it first dropped. Then there was a little bit of a modification to the process in, I think, June, July. So it's slowed down quite a bit. But we're not really sure what to think for 2025, whether it's going to have another big drop in the spring or whether we're going to be a little bit more right-sized.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just to comment too, is that your customer service, having everybody in one place, as you well know, all the councillors, we really love customer service, and I think that's a great idea. So good for that. So next, got a question for John. We put out a lot of work out to WSIP and Dillon and so on, but my question with them is that, do we set timelines for them? Like, and do they have manpower to do things? So if we're farming all this work out and they don't have manpower and they get behind, that really doesn't help us much. So do we set timelines for these people to have jobs done in time?
I should be saying this all along through, Chair. Yes, absolutely. And in terms of timelines, and I can say they not only meet our, so Planning Act has, for our applications for deadlines, we have legislated timelines in terms of, depending on the application, when we have to respond, basically deem an application complete, make a decision, all those things. They work under the exact same timelines we do. That's one of the things that unites us across jurisdictions, across the 444 municipalities. We all work under the same legislation. From a workload perspective, I would say that Dillon has not only demonstrated their ability to do that, but also set a good standard from the standpoint just from business and a customer service. Highly communicative. I have weekly meetings with Dillon, their team, their project manager, any of the staff they have, as well as with WSP. I think, again, what we are seeing is a shift from some of the work that WSP has done to Dillon, and part of that is they've also been able to demonstrate that they're being able to keep up with the pace of it. But I also think our department, in terms of the people we have in the bricks and mortar and working on that, are able to demonstrate they're bringing that up. So that's where that hopefully is translating. Maybe not as visibly yet, but certainly well with the idea of turnover in applications, pre-consultations, the timelines that are there. So yes, to go around again, longer than I needed to, but I did want to emphasize the fact that what was an experience before is slowly starting to transition into more real-time processing of these applications. In a good state anyways. Planning takes a good time. It also depends on good information and truthful information and good people operating in good faith. But again, with that information, they follow the prescriptive timelines, and we're able to work with that. But yes.
So it'd be safe to say that they do have manpower to keep up with us.
Yes, and what they have been very clear from a contracted service, and I certainly appreciate it, it's not a matter of saying we'll take on more work because it's there. They have also at certain times said that as we are bringing staff on, as our needs have grown as an organization, as a contractee, what they have done is being able to bring people on and do it quickly. I suspect in some areas we're also competing for the same planners. So, again, with a certain group of planners with certain expertise, certain experience, they may be more gravitating towards a consultant. So I think, again, that's more competition with respect to some of the same people. But again, they are able to react. And if at any time, and I know we've had these conversations, at any time they feel that they have an issue with workload, they have always communicated that. And if ever I could say, in reflecting in the last 5 months plus, maybe say a week or so until they've been able to get up to speed in terms of doing that. So it's been very good from that experience working with them.
That's good. It's good to hear it. The other thing is, thanks everybody for reminding me of the plowing match, Rebecca and everybody. I think I remember when it's coming up now. But I want to thank your team, especially a shout out to Kelly Maloney. That's been a great help to me. And so good shout out to her. So thank you everybody for your presentation today, and thank you for coming. And if there's any other questions, seeing none, could I have a motion to receive the departmental budget presentation? Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor Joyce. And I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Joyce, seconded by Councillor Tracy Richardson. Thank you very much.